We were told that we have to clean up the area where the guys fall, but to make sure that no dust goes into the chicken's lungs. And I'm like, what about the people? No one said we should watch out for Idris and the guys.
Yep, we're about to get our asses kicked. Man, read the room.
Idris was always supposed to be the more capable one, action-wise, and we wanted John to earn his way up there. By the time we reach the third act, he is a fully-fledged ass-kicker, but for this, I wanted him to get hurt. Idris needed to get some really strong punches in, and most importantly, I loved the idea of them having to fight these guys from much younger, and they didn't want to fight them. So it was almost like a fight where you're kind of talking your way out of a fight as you fight.
Trust me, I pull really well with young men who drink beer. I speak their language.
So it was split to give John more of that duty where he was on the back foot and apologizing and trying to put an end to these silly proceedings. And Idris just had a hard day, and true to his character, he was like, I'm not taking this shit. So that was the split between the two guys. I think there's maybe like one or two fancy shots. The rest is pretty damn simple because I'm always of the feeling that let the action come from, and the action energy come from inside the shot rather than helping it with, big complicated moves, or not just big complicated, just fast camera moves. I think the period of what Bourne did, 20 years ago, and that changed everybody's like, oh, that's how we do action now. We're just gonna make it super frenetic and hyper real and, 35,000 cuts, and it worked for them and it did change the genre. And I welcomed it, but I've always preferred to have the more static the camera. And if the stunt still looks impressive and the fight still looks impressive, it means you're doing something right with the stunt team and with the actors. It's all the very classic stuff, if the camera's there, you don't want to punch from this side, you punch from this side, and that's the basic stuff. In terms of rigs, I think there was a special rig made so that Idris and the two guys can fold together onto the chickens. That, again, I think is a rig we've seen before. The curious thing was the mouth gag from shooting inside the teeth, and that is actually practical. We built that mouth, and it was not as complicated or as expensive as I thought it would be. I think what we did was we augmented a few sections of his feet where you could see the glue is a very specific kind of greenish thing that you should cover up or not. It's up to you, but I'm a goddamn perfectionist. So yes, there's a little bit of fire there, but otherwise that is the man running and jumping into the pig trough. You wear a fireproof suit underneath, sort of what the race car drivers wear. There's a reason you never see people like in latex bodysuits in movies on fire. Or if you do, that's VFX, because, it adds quite a bit of, thickness to all your body parameters, body size rather. I do not know the name, but there's a special glue-like substance, which you basically cover like the hood of a car, and that substance, it will not burn through get to the paint because it just kind of like, it burns itself and it burns slowly, but still bright enough for it to be, energetic. So you put the fireproof suit on, then you get the clothes on, the costume, then you put on the glue. Then there's a variety of ways you can set it. You can be as much as a match. You can be the fireplace. I forget the right term, the long lighter. And I think here we had, maybe it was a spark from a special, like this wire thing it's almost like a TNT thing, except still smaller, and the guy's just off screen because it was quite a wide shot. We didn't want it to be, cutting them off at the legs or anything. It's tough because the cigarette, that's CG, because it's impossible to time that cigarette for one guy to take the puff to do all this. So you could do it with a real cigarette, but the amount of takes it would have taken, we'd never get to the fire. The sun would be down, it would be a nighttime scene. There was a lot of pre-thought put into how do you do this on the date, hyper quick. I think we got the whole thing in 20 minutes. So we had the American Humane Society to make sure the animals are not harmed, like the sheep. To shoot that sheep scene the way it was shot, there was a lot of work that went into that. But those same people were here with us to make sure that we treat the donkey correctly, we treat the chickens correctly, which all makes sense because we've heard horrendous things over the last 100 years of Hollywood and worldwide filmmaking. People have been just abusing animals to get something. So we didn't want to do that, even if we could get away with it, because I like animals and so should everybody else. But we get to the point where the donkey, who has quite a few prominent shots in the sequence, needed to have an emotional support pony. So every time the donkey is looking, it's not because we're going, hey, donkey, here's an apple. No, it's because it's partner. If you leave the emotional support pony away from his field of vision, he gets very worked up. So you kind of have to keep him there and maybe just poke its head out. So the pony's like, hello, and donkey's like, huh? And does the thing. So that's one. And two, with the animals, back to the American Humane Society. When we were doing the fall with Idris and the two guys, and that's a special rig where, it's a it's not, even with a special rig, it's still not very comfortable. I always quote Keanu's quote from The Matrix when he said, doesn't matter how tough you are, doesn't matter how much you rehearse, doesn't matter how much of a play fight it is. When Morpheus goes 11 times for your ribs, you're going to feel it. Obviously, these guys, and it's the whole thing, and they're falling and falling. But if you recall on the scene, there are chickens. And as they land, the chickens go and run away, right? We were told that we had to clean up the area where the guys fall, not to protect sort of the chickens from being crushed, because obviously we're doing that, but to make sure that no dust goes into the chicken's lungs. Well, I'm like, what about the people? No one said we should watch out for Idris and the guys, even though, it's okay to breathe a little dust, and it's just dust, it's ground. It's not like replacing special, asbestos that we brought in from a factory. But that was surprising to me, is that you got to make sure that the chickens don't breathe in the dust. I think there's 7 big action sequences and about 3 or 4 action beats in the film. This was the most complicated one to plan out to get it right tonally. I think we had like 3.5 days, including all the Belarusian farmer lady, and they're coming down the mountain. So tonally, it was complicated because you didn't want it to be too violent and lose its comedy edge. At the same time, you didn't want it to be a Benny Hill yakety sax kind of fight, right? So what I told the guys with the stunt team, the way I work is I give them like 20 ideas, and I'm like, I like all of these, but I know they could be better, and I'm not quite sure how to link them all together. And they go off and come back with versions that, the chain of events and all of that. And there was, obviously we had Lee Morrison, who was our stunt coordinator for the entire movie. And we had Nate Barris, a lovely South African fight choreographer. It took us a long time to cast the little Gopnik kid, Naisa Bjorn, who's a British Scandinavian dancer. I think we cast him like a month out. He was the last person to be cast because that was one of the last things we shot in this movie, was that thing we shot in Serbia. And it was very important to get that one guy. He's just, everyone's going, all right, I'm going. And Thibaut, who's this very petite Frenchman who would make it good. And of course, they go and make it good. But the amount of conversations we've had about this fight is more than we've had about Air Force One, which is obviously a much more complicated scene, more than The Beast, which is, quadruple times the complicated thing to shoot. So this wasn't ultra difficult to shoot, but it was incredibly difficult to plan out, to get that right tone where, again, it's now the promise of the premise. It's Act 2. The guys are by themselves. They don't have all their access to all the support things they usually have in friendly territory. I'll tell you where it stemmed from. I got my first car when I was about 21, and it was a stupid thing to get, but I always loved American cars, and I got a Chevy Impala in 1973 with about only 2,000 miles on it. So this must have been like 2000, 2002. And I parked it because it was at that point in Moscow, you could park your car. It was very like sidewalks, there was very little rules in terms of, now it's all cleaned up, but back then it was completely no man's land. And I parked my car next to my home, and there was a little bakery on the side. There was a lovely Georgian man who worked there who, we exchanged pleasantries, quite common. And I got out the car. The car would break down every 2 weeks. I think for 2 years that I had it, I drove for about a month all in. But I loved that car. And I come out, and there's a young kid there who's maybe about 12, 13, 11, I don't know. Street kid. And he's got a little pocket knife. And he's like, I see, he's not brandishing, he's not threatening me, but he's like, hey, do you got any money? I'm like, I'm afraid I don't. And he's like, that's fine. And I start walking away, and he's like, it'd be a shame if your car gets crashed while you're away. And I'm like, oh no. And I look at him, and he looks at me, and then the lovely Georgian baker opens the door. He's like, hey kid, get out of here. I don't know why he does a New York accent in this version, but it's the vibe was that. It's the bodega owner who's like, come on. And the kid pulls out the knife, and he turns to the man, and he's like, you got something to say? Come over here. And the guy just freezes, and he looks at me. We're both like, he's a kid. What are you going to do? And the kid turns back to me, turns back to the guy, and says, you're not coming over here? I'll come to you. And I was like, what is going to happen here? And I thought sure, if he attacks me, I'll just kick him, and that's it. Safe distance. It's like fighting a short person. It's a little easier. But I didn't want to do that. And he kind of just messed around with us for another 15, 20 seconds, which seemed like a lifetime, as always it does in these situations. And he's like, nah, I'm just through with you. Love your car. Bye. And he walked off. And I was like, all right, that's a feeling. It'd be great to capture one day in a film. And here it is.
Thank you so much for your time. This has been really amazing.
Thanks for the website, man. I read your stuff all the time. So please keep going.